A man, dressed in business attire, bought an airline ticket and boarded a plane bound for Seattle, Washington. Everything seemed normal until he handed the stewardess a handwritten note explaining that he had a bomb and requested $200,000 in $20 bills and 4 parachutes. The plane landed in Seattle, refueled, and all of the passengers and some of the crew members were allowed to disembark. The money and the parachutes were brought on board the plane. Only 4 crew members and the man remained on board. The plane took off again, and the man ordered the crew into the cockpit. When the plane landed in Reno, the man, the money, and 2 parachutes were no longer on board. Hi, I'm Mindy. Welcome to the Missing Link channel. Each urban legend and unsolved mystery is just one missing link away from being solved. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a video and help us find that missing link. This is the story of D.B. Cooper, the only unsolved commercial airline hijacking in U.S. history. This mystery will be 50 years old this November. Our discussion on this case will be split into 2 parts. This first video will be a summary of what happened that day and in the days and years after the hijacking. We will discuss the scenarios of how Cooper possibly disappeared from that plane. In the second video, we will discuss more details of the hijacking, the possible motive, the possible suspects, and what has been happening with the case over the last 50 years. And we will also discuss how air travel changed after this incident. As with most cases, I start researching and have no idea how deep these stories go. I just can't stop researching. I keep finding more and more details, more and more articles, and more interviews. I have heard the story of D.B. Cooper over the years, but I found so much information that I had never heard before. If you have never heard this case before, or even if you have, I hope you learned something in this video that you didn't know before. Let's go back to the beginning of this story. On November 24th, 1971, a man arrived at the Portland, Oregon airport. He was carrying a plain briefcase, and it could easily be assumed that he was a businessman traveling for work. He was described as a Caucasian man, approximately 35 to 50 years old, with a medium build, a medium dark or olive complexion, brown eyes, and black or dark brown hair. He stood 5'9" to 6 feet tall and weighed between 150 to 190 pounds. This man wore a black tie, dark suit, white shirt, dark shoes, and sunglasses. After arriving at the airport, the man purchased a one-way ticket with cash on Flight 305 from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington on Northwest Orient Airlines. When he purchased the ticket, he identified himself as Dan Cooper. At that time, photo identification was not required to purchase an airline ticket, so you could give any name you wanted, and the airline would have no way of knowing whether this was your true identity. The ticket only cost $18.52. Adding in tax of $1.48, the total purchase was $20. After purchasing the airline ticket, Cooper headed over to the boarding area, and not long after, boarded Flight 305. Once on board, he headed to the back of the plane and sat down in the last row, in the middle seat, on the right-hand side of the plane. After he found his seat, he ordered a bourbon and soda. He even lit a cigarette. During this time, you were allowed to smoke on an airplane. Cooper left on his sunglasses during the flight. The plane departed the Portland, Oregon airport on time. It was approximately 2:50 p.m. The plane was a Boeing 727. It was originally designed to service smaller airports, which had shorter runways. A stairway was designed to drop from the bottom of the fuselage under the tail. At this time, there was no way to prevent the door to the stairs from being opened during flight. In fact, military operations would use these stairs to perform parachute drops. The flight crew included 3 flight attendants and 3 pilots. They were based out of the Twin Cities. At some point, not long after takeoff, Cooper got the attention of one of the flight attendants. This flight attendant was 23 years old Florence Schaffner. When she approached him, he gave her an envelope. Apparently, she didn't look inside the envelope right away, but instead put it in her pocket. He had to tell her to look inside. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note, written in all capital letters, which stated, "Miss, I have a bomb here, and I would like you to sit by me." Florence sat down next to Cooper, and he opened the briefcase he was holding, showing her what looked like wires and possibly dynamite, what appeared to be a bomb. He told her his demands: $200,000 in $20 bills placed in a knapsack, 4 parachutes, specifically 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes, and they were to have a fuel truck ready to refuel the plane when they arrived in Seattle. $200,000 is a lot of money today, but it was even greater in 1971. $200,000 would be worth over $1 million today. He wanted the demands met by 5 p.m. Another flight attendant, age 22, named Tina Mucklow, was on board that night as well. She sat down next to Cooper while Florence, the flight attendant he gave the note to, informed the cockpit of the situation. Tina asked him if he had a grudge towards the airline. He said no, not towards the airline, just a grudge. He also asked that the passengers on board the plane were not told about the situation. During the flight, the passengers were just asked to remain in their seats. Let's look into what Cooper asked for. $200,000 delivered in a knapsack in $20 bills. That is 10,000 $20 bills. A $20 bill weighs 1 gram, so 10,000 $20 bills would weigh 22 pounds. The serial numbers from all the bills were documented by the bank before being delivered. He also asked for 4 parachutes. Due to the fact that he asked for 4 parachutes, the FBI thought that he might be taking a hostage, so they didn't sabotage any of the parachutes. They said it wasn't worth the risk. A skydiving school delivered the parachutes to the airport. The man also asked that a fuel truck be on the ready to refuel the plane when they arrived in Seattle. The flight from Portland to Seattle is only a 129-mile flight. The plane would be in the air for only 35 minutes, not including taxiing. When the plane came near Seattle airspace, they began circling the airport. They were waiting for the ransom and the parachutes to arrive. The ransom was collected from various Seattle banks. The plane ended up circling the airport for about 2 hours. The passengers were told that they were circling the airport to burn fuel due to a minor mechanical problem. There was definitely a storm in the area as well, and lightning could be seen outside the window of the plane. Finally, the plane landed in Seattle at 5:46 p.m. It taxied to a remote area of the airport. Tina, one of the flight attendants, exited the aircraft to retrieve the ransom and the parachutes. Cooper then allowed the 36 passengers and some of the crew members off the plane. With Cooper, 4 crew members, the ransom, and with the parachutes on board, at 7:36 p.m., the plane took off again. 2 fighter jets were escorting the plane, but the weather wasn't great, so it was hard for the fighters to see exactly what was going on with the plane. Cooper asked the pilots to head towards Mexico City, but he didn't give them the exact route he wanted them to take. He did want them to fly straight through, But that was impossible. That would be an extremely long flight, and they couldn't fly nonstop to Mexico City. They would have to stop somewhere in between to refuel. Cooper agreed to stop in Reno, Nevada, to refuel the plane. When they left Seattle, 5 individuals were on board the plane: Dan Cooper, 2 pilots, pilot Robert Scott and co-pilot William Radizak, a flight engineer, and Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant. The plane headed south towards Reno. Cooper gave specific instructions to fly lower than 10,000 feet and stay under 200 knots. He also instructed that the landing gear and rear stairway would remain down during the flight. The flight crew explained that they couldn't take off with the rear stairway down, so Cooper agreed to take off with the stairway closed inside the plane. At this point, the weather had deteriorated. They were in a rainstorm, which was very windy. The wind temperatures outside the plane were -4 degrees. Tina, the flight attendant, stayed with Cooper during takeoff. After they reached 10,000 feet, Cooper asked Tina to help him open the door at the back of the plane, which led to the stairs. Tina explained that there was a rush of noise that entered the cabin when they opened the door. She was so afraid that she would be sucked out of the plane. After what Tina thought was about 5 minutes, Cooper told her to go into the cockpit and to stay there. Tina told Cooper, "Will you please take the bomb with you?" He didn't answer her, but he was messing with the parachutes when she walked away. She left Cooper and walked down the aisle of the plane. When she turned around to look at Cooper one last time before going into the cockpit, she saw him standing in the aisle of the plane. She stepped inside the cockpit. She knew she wasn't completely out of harm's way, but she was relieved to be in the cockpit with the pilots. The crew stayed in the cockpit for the remainder of the flight. Remember, the flight departed Seattle at 7:36 p.m. About 30 minutes later, at 8:05 p.m., the crew in the cockpit communicated with Cooper over the intercom. 5 to 10 minutes after this interaction, about 8:10 to 8:15 p.m., the crew felt a weird sensation and a change in pressure within the aircraft. Co-pilot William Radizak later explained that they heard and felt an oscillation of the aircraft. The crew had no further communication with Cooper. When the plane landed in Reno, some of the crew exited the cockpit. Cooper was nowhere in sight. The briefcase was missing. The ransom was missing. 2 parachutes were gone, and the rear stairs had remained extended and damaged during the landing. Even the note he gave to the flight attendant was missing. The crew realized that he must be hiding somewhere in the plane, jumped from the plane after they landed, or he must have jumped out of the plane while it was in flight, somewhere between Seattle and Reno. Could Cooper have climbed down those stairs while the plane was in flight and jumped? What remained on the plane from Cooper was a clip-on tie from JCPenney's with a tie clasp, 8 cigarette butts, and 2 parachutes. After searching the plane, it was determined that Cooper was not on board. It became more likely that he jumped from the plane during the flight. Unfortunately, no one saw him exit the aircraft, so they were not sure when or where he jumped. The pilots of the fighter jets escorting the plane didn't see anything because it was so dark out and rainy that night. The co-pilot told authorities that the crew felt an oscillation of the aircraft 5 to 10 minutes after the last communication with Cooper. Could that sensation be when Cooper walked down the staircase and jumped from the aircraft? Let's continue on with the timeline. The FBI searched the area where they believe Cooper could have jumped. If Cooper did jump when the oscillation was felt by the flight crew, it was guesstimated that he jumped somewhere north of Portland. This area was full of mountains, and dense forests. It was described as difficult terrain. The bad weather and cold temperatures didn't help the search either. Throughout the many searches, no trace of Cooper, the parachutes, or any of the items he jumped with were ever located. News outlets began covering the hijacking. During one of these broadcasts, the hijacker's name was changed from Dan Cooper, which was on the original ticket, to D.B. Cooper. The name D.B. Cooper stuck. Many witnesses, from the crew to the passengers, got a good look at Cooper that night. A forensic sketch artist made multiple drawings of the suspect from the witnesses' descriptions. Remember, the authorities compiled a list of all the serial numbers from the 10,000 $20 bills. There was a newspaper article published that listed these serial numbers. To encourage people to check their $20 bills, a ransom was offered if a bill turned up that matched any of these serial numbers. Of course, the FBI quickly got involved. Their case was called Norjack. The authorities believed that Cooper jumped in the area of Merwin Dam and the Lewis River. At night, the dam is lit up, so if Cooper saw the lights, he would know exactly where he was. There were plane, helicopter, and foot searches of the area where it was believed that Cooper jumped from the plane. Looking for Cooper himself, the parachutes, or any evidence left behind. Originally, the search area was 24 square miles. Unfortunately, nothing was ever found from these searches. A hunter in the area found part of an exit door sign. It was believed to be from the hijacked plane. This also doesn't necessarily mean that Cooper jumped in this exact area. We know that the stairs were down at some point during the flight and remained down the entire flight because they were still down when the plane landed. Perhaps the exit door sign found by the hunter was blown off in the wind sometime during the flight. Not long after the hijacking, 6 letters were received by various newspapers claiming to be written by D.B. Cooper. The notes varied, some handwritten, some typed, some using cutout letters from magazines. The first letter, received November 29, 1971, by the Reno Evening Gazette. It was postmarked from Oakdale, California. This letter was made from cutout letters from another newspaper. It read, "Attention, thanks for the hospitality, was in a rut. Signed, D.B. Cooper." The second letter, postmarked a day later on November 30th, 1971, and received by the Vancouver province in British Columbia. This letter was handwritten. It read, "The composite drawing on page 3, as suspected by the FBI, does not represent the truth. I enjoyed the Grey Cup game. Am leaving Vancouver. Thanks for the hospitality." The third letter, postmarked a day after the second, on December 1st, 1971, and received by the Portland Oregonian in Northern Oregon. The letter was made from cutout letters from a Playboy magazine. It read, "Am alive and doing well in hometown. P.O. The system that beats the system. Signed, D.B. Cooper." The fourth, postmarked the same day as the third, on December 1st, 1971, and received by the Reno Evening Gazette. It was mailed from Sacramento, California. The letter was made from cutout letters. It read, "Plan ahead for retirement income. Signed, D.B. Cooper." These first 4 were thought to be hoaxes. They do seem to be connected to each other, though. They seem to be written in the same way, most with cutout letters from a magazine or a newspaper. and they seemed to be talking about similar things. Two of them even said, "Thanks for the hospitality." Letter 3 mentions that his hometown is P.O. Does this stand for Portland, Oregon, where the plane originally departed from that night in November of 1971? Did someone really drive or fly from Oakdale, California, to British Columbia, to Portland, Oregon, and back to Sacramento, California, in a matter of days, if they weren't D.B. Cooper, to mail these letters? That seems like a lot of work if it was just a hoax. The next two letters were believed to not be hoaxes. In fact, they were not released by the FBI until the 2000s. Perhaps the contents of these letters were not released because the authorities believed they might hold some valuable information. Later that same year as the hijacking, a letter was received, postmarked December 11th, 1971, and signed by D.B. Cooper. The letter was sent to the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Seattle Times, and the Washington Post. It read, "Sirs, I knew from the start that I wouldn't be caught. I didn't rob Northwest Orient because I thought it would be romantic, heroic, or any other euphemise that seem to attach themselves to situations of high risk. I'm not modern-day Robin Hood. Unfortunately, do have only 14 months to live. My life has been one of hate, turmoil, hunger, and more hate. This seemed to be the fastest and most profitable way to gain a few fast grains of peace of mind. I don't blame people for hating me for what I've done, nor do I blame anyone for wanting me to be caught and punished. Though this can never happen, here are some, not all, of the things working against the authorities. I'm not a boasting man. I left no fingerprints. I wore a toupee. I wore putty makeup. They could add or subtract from the composite 100 times and not come up with an accurate description, and we both know it. I've come and gone on several air flights already, and am not holed up in some obscure backwoods town. Neither am I a sociopathic killer. As a matter of fact, I've never even received a speeding ticket. Thank you for your attention. D.B. Cooper." The sixth letter, postmarked March 28, 1972, over 4 months after letter 5 was received, the Portland Oregonian received another letter. This letter was mailed from Jacksonville, Florida. It read, "This letter is to let you know that I am not dead, but really alive, and back from the Bahamas. So your silly troopers up there can stop looking for me. That is just how dumb this government is. I like your articles about me, but you can stop them now. D.B. Cooper is not real. I had to do something with the experience Uncle taught me, so here I am, a very rich man. Uncle gave too much of it to world idiots, and no work for me. I had to do it to relieve myself of frustration. I went out of the system and saw a way through good old Unc. Now you know, I am going around the world, and they will never find me, because I am smarter than the system's lackey cops and lame duck leaders. Now it is Uncle's turn to weep and pay one of its own some cash for a change. And please tell the lackey cops D.B. Cooper is not my real name. Signed, a rich man." When the letter talks about Uncle, does he mean Uncle Sam, like the government? Was he implying that he was in the military at some point? Do you think any or all of these letters were written from the hijacker, or just someone that had a little too much time on their hands, and someone just trying to insert themselves in this mystery? We will discuss these letters more in the second video. The case stayed cold for 9 years. Of course, the authorities were still working during this time, interviewing possible suspects. But no definite suspect was located, and no evidence from the crime was found. That was until 9 years later. On February 10th, 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram started digging in the sand next to a river in southern Washington, near Vancouver. While digging, he found a $20 bill. He kept digging and kept finding more money. The bills were definitely deteriorated. Some bills were found buried 2 or 3 feet in the sand. Overall, $5,800 in $20 bills were found. Rubber bands were still surrounding the wads of money. Brian's parents took the money to the FBI. The serial numbers were a match. The $5,800 was part of the $200,000 that was delivered to Dan Cooper on the hijacked plane. However, the area where the money was found was far away from where the FBI originally estimated where Dan Cooper had likely jumped, or where he would have landed after parachuting from the aircraft. The authorities wondered why the money was found in a different area than they anticipated. Could Cooper have lost some of the money in the fall? Or did the money travel down the river over time? The rubber bands around the money were also a strange component. The rubber bands wouldn't likely have withstood the elements and water for a year, a little less 9 years. So the money with the rubber bands must have been buried in the sand within a year of the jump. The authorities wondered, did Cooper bury the money on purpose? But if so, why only $5,800? The area where the money was found was searched by the authorities, and no other money or any other evidence was ever located. Let's look into the plane itself. What happened aboard the airplane that night? What do you think happened to Cooper? I see 4 possible scenarios. 1. I don't hear this one discussed a lot, but I think it is worth mentioning, since it was a possibility in the beginning. Did Cooper jump out of the plane after it landed in Reno? I think this is the least likely of the scenarios, but it definitely could be a possibility. I would imagine that so many people were on or near the runway in Reno when the plane landed. But how smart would it be to make everyone think you jumped in the middle of the flight? Cooper could have put down the stairs leading outside the plane and tossed all the evidence, including 2 parachutes, the briefcase where he supposedly had the bomb, at least $5,800 from the ransom, and the original note he gave the flight attendant. Could he have safely gotten off the plane after it landed? Would he have definitely been seen? Could he have run to safety before being spotted? The airport says this wasn't a possibility. 2. Did he jump from the plane but die in the fall? Did Cooper have trouble with the parachute or not pull the ripcord in time? And did he fall to his death? If he landed in the forest area, would his body ever be found? We do know that one of the parachutes was a dummy chute, and it was sewn shut. Did Cooper choose this parachute out of the 4, and it ended up costing him his life? Even if he did choose the correct parachute, it was a military-style parachute, and it was not steerable. Could he have parachuted into some unforgiving terrain and be killed in the fall? It was described as hostile terrain, and it was in the darkness of night. 3rd, did he survive the jump, but die sometime after he landed? Let's say that he made it and landed safely. Could he have died while trying to escape? 4th, did he survive the jump, walk out of the mountainy terrain, and successfully accomplish the hijacking, never to be discovered? If he did die that day during the jump, wouldn't you think someone would have reported him missing? But there was no missing person reported around this time in this area that matched the description of Cooper. Many locals think that Cooper survived the jump and walked away with the money. Which do you think is most likely? Do you think there is another possible scenario? This is where we are going to leave off the video for today. In the second video, we will discuss more details of the hijacking, the possible motive, the possible suspects, and what has been happening with the case over the last 50 years. Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button so I know you enjoy hearing about mysterious unsolved mysteries. And hit the subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified when the second video is up. And follow me on social media as well to see what I'm working on next. As always, have a wonderful day. Watch out for each other and keep looking for that missing link. Love ya, and see you in my next video.